Welcome to the Audio Description Network Alliance bonus episode. We're really happy to have Sarah Mennell with us. She is an audio description writer and live announcer for audio description. We also have Jeff Heck, also an audio description writer and an audio description live announcer. Both brought Paralympics to audio description. Sarah in Canada and Jeff in US. We're so excited to have you both here. Jeff, I interrupted you before I started recording. Could you talk, please? I'm so excited to hear what you have to say.
Getting there and while we were there, getting to the two NBC studios in Stamford, I flew in from Indianapolis during Hurricane Henri. So landed in LaGuardia as it's hitting. It was just a little bit to the east of us, right? So then a week, 9 days later, was it the one that hit Louisiana, Irma, or I can't remember the name of it. It was with an I. Hits New York and hits Stamford. So we're flooded. I mean, NBC puts a in-place order. If you're at NBC, you have to stay there. If you're at the hotel trying to get into work, you got to stay there until the roads quit flooding. And it's like, okay, when are the roads going to go down? I said, well, when the tide goes out. So it was 4-foot high water, just 3 or 4 streets up from our hotel. So it was like, here's a welcome to live AD.
What was your experience like, Sarah, when you where were you? What was your involvement as far as location goes?
Well, I wasn't in the water, so it was a little bit nicer than Jeff's situation. I was just downtown in Toronto at the CBC building in a small little booth watching all the action.
Very cool. I'm curious, Sarah, did you have any preparation that you did to get ready for audio description for the Paralympics? And then Jeff, I'll ask you too.
Yes. So the main thing about being an announcer for live DV is that, or live AD, I think in Canada we refer to it as DV. It's you don't know what you're going to see, so you have to kind of prep everything. And the Tokyo Paralympics and the Olympics were so closed about their information that they didn't give us, and the opening ceremonies are usually a big extravaganza. And I don't know if you got information, Jeff, but we didn't get any information for any of the opening ceremonies. So it was just a question of researching everything we thought that might appear maybe so we would be able to describe it. Which means like looking up Japanese traditional costumes and looking up different athletes from different countries and who might be the flag bearers and who, I mean, that stuff is all available, but it's knowing what they're going to focus on that we have no control or no idea about that. So I had a huge stack of information about all the different sports, all the different categories, what they wear, what material they use, where they compete, what things are made of, just to try and have as much at my fingertips as possible. My tongue tip as possible.
Jeff, do you have a similar experience where you had to basically research the entire internet?
Yeah, Sarah actually trained me because I've not done live before. And Sarah actually trained me before we went, sent me several clips of existing Olympic clips, and I would, record them here as best I could with the computer, send them to her, and she went over things. That was a huge help because live is so different. Like Sarah was saying, the research, oh my, it's you never know what's coming because thankfully I did not do any of the opening or closing ceremonies. That was Norma and Tony. They've done it. Oh, wow. They had just done the regular Olympics 2 weeks prior. And I want to say they've gone back as far as 8 years where they've done both the regular Olympics. And that was always just a primetime show. So it was like from 8 at night till midnight or 1 a.m. So it's like a 6-hour shift. So they had a pretty good idea. Like Sarah was saying, they had to research what was the clothing, who are the flag bearers, what was going to happen. And they would get sheets usually. I think they got them, Sarah, the day before pretty much. When we got there on Sunday, and I want to say they got them on Sunday night or Monday, the sheets that had the information. But like Sarah said,
we didn't get those sheets in Canada.
Oh, wow.
the magical media guides that are printed out that we hold like gold, like, oh, the media guide. Oh, and we didn't get one for the opening ceremonies. We got them for the closing though, which was it just makes your description that much more coherent, smooth, concise, direct. You're not searching for words, places,
The scene advantage we may have had was that we were actually at the NBC studios in Stamford. So we stayed in a hotel, and I mean, most of the announcers for the Paralympic Games were actually stationed in the same row that we were. We were in Studio 4, which is, holy cow, it's the size of a football field at least. And it's just nothing but this row is booths, this row is booths, this row is booths. I mean, there's probably 100 recording booths in that just one area where we were. And so that was an advantage that all the announcers were there. And so the guides were fresh, the sheets were fresh. So you knew pretty much what was going to happen. Now that changed because like the night before your shift, in our shifts, we started at, I think 10 p.m. and we went till 9 to 9:30 a.m. So all of the events were you guys a similar shift up there, Sarah?
No, not.
Yeah, I had the 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. shift, and I would have to get to the studio at about 2 a.m. to do research because, okay, and I'm still not, is it Friday? Is it Tuesday? I don't know. I'm still recovering. But I'm working on Wednesday morning at 5 a.m., but it's really the Tuesday shift because it started on Tuesday night. So it goes from Tuesday. But anyway, so they would do like 4 hours. The first two, Norm would do from like 9 to 1. Tony would do 1 to 5. And then I came in and I did 5 to 9. But like I said, I get there at 2 because the day before, you get your sheets of what the show is going to be about, what sports are going to be covered and all that. You get in at 2 a.m. and I'd say a good third or more of the sheet you got the night before, pitch it, because it changes so much. And then as the show goes on, it changes because they're planning for a 5-set match, say in volleyball or in tennis, at best 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 5. Well, somebody may win 6-love, or smoke somebody in volleyball where it's, a 25-0 or just really quick. So it's on the fly. You just got to be able to adapt. So that's a lot of that was changed. That was the biggest hurdle for me, was just getting used to how rapid live television really is. It just, because it changes in a heartbeat. It really does.
Sarah, when you were training Jeff on doing live AD, what was something that you found really like, let's show off Jeff's skills here. Like, what was the thing that you saw was like, oh, he really gets it? And then Jeff, maybe the same thing for Sarah. Let's get some good gossip.
Jeff has such a nice, smooth, easygoing quality to his voice that I knew he would be great, because he just is able to slide in without any, because there's a certain level of panic that's happening as you're trying to describe things as they're happening on screen, that underneath you're like, okay, what is that thing called? What is it? It's a carbon fiber blade. And you're still trying to maintain this allure of calm ease. And Jeff immediately had that calm demeanor. He could just describe what he saw and keep it clear, keep it concise. He wouldn't flub things. He wouldn't mess up. It was really, really, I didn't actually have to train him at all.
Very good. And how great, Jeff, to be unpanicking the audio description live announcer. What was your experience working with Sarah when she was training you? Were there assumptions that you made that she helped maybe confirm, or maybe some things that you learned?
No, I learned, all of it was learned because you just heard her talk, and it's just nice, smooth, easygoing. And that's what I tried to emulate, is just trying to keep that voice. Tony has that same delivery, as does Norma. I mean, trust me, I was petrified minute one of, okay, that point to me of like, your life is like, oh man, this is really happening, So, but again, like Sarah said, just trying to keep that really just that smooth, not trying to get too high, too low, just keep it easy going. That's what I found, especially your voice, Sarah, because you're just consistent across the board. So listening to past events, really when Sarah sent me the clips of what to expect, looking for those gaps, because we try not to step on the announcers, but sometimes you have to, which I found out, because there's a volleyball game going on and 15 points have gone by and they're talking about this guy's horse when he was 2 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, the visually impaired have not, nothing's been said to update them. The score that used to be 2-1 is now 17-13. So you're kind of doing some of the announcing as well. You just got to really weigh out when to talk, when not to talk. Sometimes I still feel, and Tony, and I think you'll agree too, Sarah, I think we talk too much sometimes. But we had a feedback group, and I think one of the feedback things was, if you're in doubt, just go ahead and say it, because more info is better for us than less. I don't know if you were part of that group, Sarah, or not, but that was something that really, before we went, we got really good feedback from the Olympic Games, and so that was good. Of don't be so afraid to. We may have said too much, but don't be afraid to, because the announcers, like I said, sometimes they're off on tangents that we don't know. And that's part of what they're supposed to do too.
And that's another real skill in especially the Paralympics and the Olympics, is getting to, each announcer has a different style. So you might have one announcer who just, drifts away to past games. And like you said, a 2-year-old horse, he's talking about something completely different, or she is. And then you have other announcers who stick with the game. So when the announcers who stick with the game, your job is, okay, I can sit back a little, I'll add in when they don't fill out the picture. But the other announcers who drift away, you have to kind of step over them to keep the visually impaired audience reminded of what's happening on the screen in front of them. So
yeah, and one thing in swimming, did you cover much swimming up there?
A little bit. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I cannot remember the woman announcer, but she was the best at describing the categories that we were in, like S6, X7, S8, whatever, S11, like S11, the swimmers are visually impaired, and to even out the field, they have to wear blackout goggles. Mm-hmm. So, everybody, they can't see. And she did a really good job. Michelle Conkle, maybe it was her name. She did the best job of really setting up what the division was. So S6 swimmers have this, going on, S7 have that. And that was one of the big things, because like some of the wheelchairs in wheelchair racing on the track, they looked like tricycle bikes, but they were actually wheelchairs that had modified with a bicycle wheel in the front and an extension. It's just incredible. But yeah, that was really nice when the announcers would announce more so than go on tangents. That was really helpful to us, at least to me. Before I left, a friend of mine here in Indianapolis works for the Indianapolis Star. And Indiana had a ton of athletes in the Paralympic Games. I'm not sure why, but there were several. 12 to 18 athletes were from Indiana, and they were all doing quite well. Well, in the regular Olympics, there's a sport called handball. And my friend at the Star said, wow, I really loved handball. So I wrote him on Twitter, said, hey, there's a cool sport in the Paralympics called goalball. And that's where there's teams of 3, they're blindfolded, they cannot see, they throw a ball that has bells in the middle of it. And that's how they can hear where the ball is. And there's this big goal, it's like 26 feet across the court. And they throw it back and forth. They're doing 360s. This thing's going 40, 50 miles an hour, right? Well, I said, check out goalball in the Paralympics. Well, one of the goalball team members for USA saw my tweet and tweeted back, said, oh, thanks a lot. I'd love to talk to you. What are you doing? So we talked on the phone several times before he went over. During the games, the U.S. was down like 4-1, came back and won 5-4. So I tweeted him and I said, hey, nice job, keep it up. Well, he retweeted it and also said, hey, this is one of the audio describers, and put out all the hashtags about audio description and everything, and really promoted it. And several of those team members who are visual impaired said, you don't realize what this means to us. And that was the coolest feedback to hear, that at the end of the day, that what we're doing did make a difference somewhere, that they truly appreciated and thought the audio description was one of the best things to come along in years.
And it sounds like that kind of connection between the audience as well as the athletes is, that's the whole point here.
Yeah. They were so happy. Mr. Kusku was his name, and he was John Kusku. He's a teacher in real life, but he was just so pleased that we were doing this. And then that was cool to hear from an actual athlete in there that knew what audio description was about and uses it all the time at home because he's visually impaired. So that was really neat to hear that.
Very cool. And Sarah, if we could ask you about any collaborations that you had, either with the company that you worked with, or anything about the Paralympics that gave you a little bit extra of an edge. Any collaborations that you could talk about?
Well, we did. We were where we were working from, we're not as on site as Jeff is. It sounds like you're, right in the thick of things with the announcers. The way it works at the company I was working with is we're off in a booth far away from the studio, away from. So I work with, the technicians. They would give me the rundowns every day, which was super, super helpful because we could see because what we were describing was the prime time events. We weren't just describing the ongoing events. It was sort of a cut together primetime event with a person in studio talking in between. So we had a rundown of everything, and those technicians made sure we had everything, which was great. And sometimes they would even play some of the footage that had already been filmed. But we were lucky because they were showing the primetime events. It had happened the night before, so I could always watch it in the middle of the night and watch the games, watch the highlights, know that was probably what was going to happen the next day. And I could really be on my game because they love showing wheelchair basketball in Canada and wheelchair rugby, which I can see why. They're both incredibly active, vibrant sports that were really great to watch. And
the athletes are really hot. I'm sorry, I've Googled.
Yeah, they are. It's very true.
Yeah, sorry. But to your point about the with the
but that's a subjective perspective. So
exactly. My mistake. Yes, exactly. Let's talk about that. Let's leverage that ridiculous comment that I made into the subjectivity. That could you have the sense of this is my subjective approach to this, and I'm going to go with it, or this is my subjective approach to it, I'm not going to go with it.
Well, that's a good question. I try, because it's a sport, I try to stick to the facts of the sport. So in the game, there's not a lot of room to talk because of the announcers. But I'm trying to fill in what they're not filling in. If someone falls over on their wheelchair and they're on their back and a teammate helps them up, or maybe one of the opposing team members wheels by them and doesn't help them. Like, I'm trying to include that information and the sweat beating off their faces and their hair is wet with sweat. And I think I even described at one point some of the black from the rubber on their wheelchairs would start marking up their faces because they would wipe the sweat. And so they'd have these. So I try and stick to the facts that have to do with the sport. If there was more time, if there was a pause button where I could pause the game and go into detailed description of each of the players, that would be my ideal for live audio description.
Gotcha. That luxury of time that it seems so elusive. But what I'm hearing is that you were really objective in the facts. You said facts literally. It's like what's on screen is what you're presenting, and there wasn't commentary. Jeff, did you have the same experience in your work?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like Sarah was saying, there's so many things going on with the sweat and especially in the rugby game. It's a violent game. Those chairs they're hitting hard. They're replacing wheels. It's like every 5 minutes, somebody has to get a new wheel replaced because it got hit so hard. And one of the things I found hard for me was because I'm a sports fan, and I had to stop holding myself back from doing that because the hit was so hard and so violent, and you're just holding it. Okay, I'm not a fan. I'm here to, just what am I seeing, and being very objective, like not raising my voice because USA scored a goal to tie it or came back. You just got to be very objective and report. But yeah, we had a lot of the wheelchair rugby. We had a lot of wheelchair basketball. One thing too, what Sarah was saying was I would get in at 2 and I'd do my research until 5. And a lot of times I had to, because I'd have Iran playing RPC, which is the Russian Paralympic Committee. Those last names, holy cow. So it's like you have to research how to say the names. Well, I'm into curling big time here in the States, and I have a lot of Russian curling friends. So it was daytime for them. So I'm messaging them, hey, how do you say this name? Hey, how do you say this name? And they're actually recording it and sending it to me via Facebook Messenger. Here's how you say it. So I nailed the RPC. Now, some of the other names, not so much. And that I don't know if you found this too, Sarah, but you say, okay, I'm just going to wait for the announcer to say their name and I'll say it. They never did.
Well, I liked your trick because I got to watch the game before it happened, and before each game, they would announce every player.
You had an advantage there. We're live. It's like that was one of those
Yeah.
things where the night before sheet didn't say anything about Iran playing Angola or whoever. Well, there was one. I said, "Oh no!" So we went first names. A lot of times the announcers went with their first names only, which I found interesting. And sometimes the players had their first names on the back of their jersey. So I was like, okay, that's easier. But I was surprised at how much research, even not even before, but while you're there, even more. And I spent at least, I'd go to bed at 2 p.m, get up at 10. I'd do a couple of hours of research, try to eat something. Then I'd get there. I'd do more research based on what my call sheet said, we were covering for the day. Just tons of research, so much. And then we had a producer. We were lucky. Monica Downer was our producer. She gave us, tons of information. She was so wonderful. She gave us the sheets, told us what was going on, was in your ear if something interesting was going on, or a fact that maybe we needed to throw in. So it was really, I think it was an advantage for me to be at NBC for my first one, to have all of the people there and also get feedback from some of the producers at NBC as to, hey, okay, this is great. You did this well, or try to do this. So I had a lot of support for my first go around for sure.
Yeah, including the curling Russians collaborating with the pronunciations, which I find fascinating.
Yeah, that was, it just came, it's like, okay, these guys are going to know how to say it, so let's go there. And, I'm friends with so many of them, and they were so helpful. And that's the cool thing. When you tell people what you're doing, the community they love it. They're just so, oh, this is wonderful. It really is. It's so nice to have the support.
And what it sounds like is both of you had different kinds of support, whether it was this research that you're talking about, or the collaboration, whether it was, as you had said, Sarah, with the technicians giving you the rundowns for the previous day, that all of these things you could assemble and kind of collaborate, like in your own work as live announcers. Okay, you've got all these different things. I'm reaching out into the sky and picking out this, and this is what I'm going to filter through because of that enemy of time. I'm curious, if you were to look at Paralympics for the next time, what would be some things that you'd love to see continue that happened this time that would just be great, and maybe some other things that you'd love to see happen maybe a little bit differently, if I could ask?
Proposals on the track.
Oh, yes.
Did you see that one, Jeff?
Yeah, did. Yes, that was cool.
A guide for a visually impaired runner proposed to her on the track.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, that is amazing.
Did you describe that, Sarah, when that happened?
I wasn't in that day. My another describer was in that day, and so what we would do is we'd email each other at the end of our session of work and say, okay, they were highlighting these athletes, just be aware, because then they would repeat, they'd repeat some of the highlights in montages. And hers was like, I almost teared up when the guide proposed to his runner. Yeah.
That was cool.
I found there were so many. I found these games. I find the Olympics inspiring. I find the Paralympics inspiring. Sometimes I found it hard to describe because I would always get really emotional at the swimming, especially when they're nearing the end, and then I found it difficult to describe. Or when they're on the podium and some of them are tearing up and they're all wearing masks, and some of them you can see their breathing gets heavy behind their masks and their shoulders shake, and it was difficult to describe because I got involved emotionally.
Definitely. That is, the amount of sportsmanship that was shown by these athletes. And I wrote something on my Facebook page. I said, I just did this thing, and I was just so impressed by just everybody got along. If somebody, the wheelchair rugby used to be called murder ball, and they can't market something called murder ball, so they changed the name. But like, if somebody got knocked down in a chair, like if I hit somebody hard and I knocked them over, 99% of the time I'm saying, oh my, are you okay? I meant to hit you, but not knock you into next Tuesday. So it was just really something else, the sportsmanship displayed. And that after every contest, no matter what it was, they would line up across from one another at half court or at the tennis court net or wherever it was, and applauded one another, and just really, really, it was so fun to see, so nice to see. Just the cooperation, the true spirit of sport was on display there.
And the swimmers reaching over the lane ropes to hug one another at the end, even though they were going against each other, and they were celebrating each other's wins. I found that very, very moving and
I
inspiring.
think, yeah, that just I'd kind of seen the Paralympics before, but some of the description in the swimming, I'd forgotten that the visually impaired, when they're coming to the wall, there's a tapper that stands at the end of the pool, and they have like it was like an 8-9 foot pole with a foam ball on the end of it, and they tap the swimmer on the back or on the head or on the shoulder. It lets them know they're within X amount of feet of the wall, and they begin their flip. It's amazing what these athletes can do. Just, I think describing those little things that other people don't know about, visually, like it really, because sometimes they didn't describe the tapping or the touch panel wall that, when you hit it's automatically registers your time, and the body links and things like that. So, yeah.
Or the swimmers who might be a double arm amputee that touch the end of the wall with their head.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
yeah.
They were extraordinary.
It just, yeah, it's a great, and you have to be, and that's the one thing. I mean, like when the announcers are doing basketball or rugby, they only have to focus on that sport. We don't know where we're going next. We might be going from swimming to table tennis, to a tennis match, to taekwondo, to who knows, the equestrian with the horse dancing. That was the hardest, and thankfully I didn't get any of that, because that was Tony had a lot of that. He did a wonderful job with it. It's just so hard to describe the movements of the horse, and that's, I think, where a more experienced describer thankfully got it. I mean, and that's what I would do too, is if I was in the booth for a couple of hours of Tony's shift. So if he's covering something I didn't know, I'm just writing or typing furiously, because I know it's going to come back on my shift. The highlight of something, you're going to get that in your 4-hour shift. So I just took copious notes of everything that he said or what they did before. So that really helped a lot. The support of Tony and Norma being there, just being able to listen to how they did and say, okay, and ask them questions. That was just wonderful.
Sarah, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience about your experience live announcing the Paralympics?
It is a job that I don't take lightly, because I do want to do a good job, and I want to add to the commentators are already very, very skilled. And so I don't want to take away from that experience. I only want to add to that experience. So I suppose I always think about it as if I were describing to a friend who's sitting beside me, and they can't see what I can see. And I'm trying to fill out the picture for them as to the best of my ability.
That's a good way. That's the nail on the head. You don't pretend you're talking to a friend in the room. What is it that the announcers are not hitting, that they're missing, that is of value and is important? I think that is just like what Sarah said. Yeah.
So I guess in some ways it is subjective, because I'm looking at the screen. I can only see it from my perspective, but I'm also trying to imagine who is the audience who is viewing this. It's probably someone who's interested in sports. So I want to keep the description within that realm of specificity.
In other words, your take that you're bringing, that subjectivity is also, if I may, based on respect of the audience. When you're saying you're talking to a friend, you're not talking down to a child. You're not talking to a distant person. This is a acting thing. It's like that's on that side. But what I'm hearing from you is that you treated this work with the respect it deserved and made sure that it was in parity to what was happening with the other announcers who are also coming through on the track. And with the research that you and that Jeff did, that perspective that you brought put you at a different place than someone who's like, oh, I want to help. And No, no. You brought a level of professionalism based on your research, based on your collaboration, based on the knowledge that you shared with your cohort Jeff in the States, based on the respect that you gave your audience. That perspective that you brought is maybe subjective, but it's a subjectivity that brings the best quality and excellence that the Paralympics could have had. So I just turned that around a little bit. How's that?
That sounds great.
Jeff?
That sounds great. Yeah, I mean, like I said, what blew me away was how much research I did before I went, because I bought a Chromebook, best thing I bought. I without that I would have been in a lot of trouble. And I just put every sport in its own category with just the quick highlights of what are the important key things. And there's a lot of really great. There's a Paralympic.org website, I believe it was, that was wonderful at hitting the key things that really need to be out there. And so, I mean, I researched for weeks before going, hours before my shift started, even during. I mean, you can't learn everything. It's like, oh, that's nowhere. You see something an athlete was doing, you're like, okay, what is that? And you're just typing furiously, trying to find what it is and bringing it in. So yeah, the research angle was something else that really, you want to do the best job you can. And it's a lot of research and a lot of work. And it is just more like, it's not like, hey, I do want to help. You have to be ready to go.
Could people reach you either on social media or website or anywhere else that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Facebook and stuff, but I mean, one of the cool things, and you're part of this group, is the audio description discussion group on Facebook.
Yeah, Kevin and I founded that, and it's now got like 1,600 people on it.
That is such a valuable resource. And I mean, if you want to learn anything there is to know, join that group. I mean, it talks about not only what we do live, but the networks like HBO Max or Amazon, the streaming services, what's new, what's been released. And Roy, you've been great. I mean, Roy is a top-notch leader in audio description here in the States and worldwide, not just the States, but that resource alone is, if you want to know anything there is to know about audio description, join the audio description discussion group on Facebook. That is the key resource. It truly is.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing that. And it's great to know the audio description project with ACB also has some great resources.
Yes.
I'm sure in Canada, beyond descriptive video works, there's also a lot of resources. Sarah, can you think of anything off the top of your head that, if I can put you on the spot for this question, where would you steer people if they were interested in learning more about Canada's approach to audio description or descriptive video in your case?
Well, they could certainly look at the company that we work for, which is Descriptive Video Works.
Good company.
They have a website. They're a great company. They do a lot of focus groups and a lot of work within Vancouver. And they work with is it called the Blind Alliance, I believe, or in Vancouver, they have a focus group where they meet regularly and they have discussions with visually impaired people to find out what they want to hear, what's missing for them. And through them, it brought up this interesting discussion of whether or not to mention the color of people's skin, which was a very valid discussion to have. And some of the people who are visually impaired, they would say things like, "Oh, I didn't know Idris Elba was black," because it had never been mentioned. And so that brought up the topic of like, okay, so how do we approach race? How do we approach? And it opened a lot of doors. So I'm grateful for Descriptive Video Works for providing a platform where those conversations could be had.
Very cool. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you too, Jeff, for both of your work on the Paralympics and bringing audio description live announcers to access for this particular sporting event. I mean, that sounds like an understatement based on this story that you've shared with all the great experiences that you both had in sharing what was happening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roy.